when you have no direction and you have only dreams and no way to, like, you don't know how to figure it out, that stuff is really hard. Like, I felt some days I just could not get any work done. I just play League for 40 hours a week, and my wife comes home. She's like, "Hey, how was your day? Did you get work done?" I'm like, "No." I was like, I tried applying for jobs. Like it's hard. It's really hard, depressing, and it's super hard to do alone.
That's marketing analyst and content creator Sam Hahn, talking about his struggles navigating the esports job market. As a marketing analyst for Golden Guardians, Sam focuses on curating social media content through research. Sam also creates content for people looking to get a job in esports and does free resume reviews for people in the community. I'm your host, Drew Proctor, and on today's episode of the Esports Careers Podcast, I take a deep dive with Sam to explore his journey from engineer to esports, the biggest issues he sees in esports resumes, and how he came to work with Travis Gafford. Let's hop into today's episode. Welcome back to the Esports Careers Podcast. I've got a really special guest today. His name is Sam Hahn. Did I say that right? The last name?
Yes, you did. I'm really happy to hear that.
Do most people fudge that one up?
I've always grown up hearing people say Sam Han. I'm like, it's just like Han Solo. It's like Han Solo. It's really simple. You've all heard it. It's not Han. Well done. Great.
I'm glad I nailed it first try. So you actually work for Golden Guardians as a marketing analyst, but you also create content on the side as you create esports career advice videos. Did I kind of give it a good description?
Yeah, I think that's what it looks like right now. It's not necessarily at least for the content stuff, it might not be my main focus. I'm still trying to figure that stuff out. But yeah, I'm just looking to do stuff on the side, hopefully, at least, yeah, my content stuff on the side, trying to focus on like helping people get into esports / people that are in esports to like find a community that really cares about making the future of esports better. So just like creating that community and just talking about topics surrounding just really interesting things about esports, hopefully.
Yeah, that's actually how I found you. Is I believe somebody on Twitter that I followed either liked or retweeted one of your tweets about a new video. It was probably, I think it might have been like reviewing community manager esports application or one of those one of those first videos when you started doing the esports career type content.
Yeah.
So that's how I found you, and I think that I actually submitted a resume and that you reviewed, and you gave like a lot of really good feedback, and I was really grateful
Thanks.
for the feedback that you gave on it. So
I'm really happy to hear that. Like, I think at least like for me, I hear so many stories about people wanting to get into esports, and I've been there. And then I feel like I see a lot of simple things to help people. It's not even like really difficult. So I'm just like, people need to know this. Like, writing resumes are really hard, but once you figure it out, it can just be a formula. And then once you have some direction, suddenly the resumes get better and better and easier to write. And for me, I have to look through some applications for a lot of video editors that I try to bring on. And I don't necessarily look at resumes that much, but either way, I'm just like, wow, people don't know how to present themselves to network or to find jobs and these kind of things. And I've been working in the professional environment as an engineer where things are a little more traditional, I guess. So we've all been through those, like how to write cover letters, how to write resumes, and how to present yourself, those kind of things. And I'm like, oh, that's like, I don't see that often here. So when someone does it, it really stands out. So I'm just like, hey, doing these resume reviews are helping people, and hopefully through these videos, it can help other people find like what they're looking for, whether it's in esports or not.
So you were in engineering for
Mhm.
a while. Are esports resumes and let's just say engineering resumes, should they look completely different, or kind of what differentiates those two?
I think most of the times they will look different. I think with engineering, it's just really matter of fact. They just want to see what skills you know, what projects you've done. And like, for example, the skills section is just like really important. Like, oh, I have 3D modeling experience. I know how to do stress analysis tools with three different programs. I understand these codes, or I'm certified with this kind of X, Y, and Z, right? and that's how a lot of engineers and engineering firms hire. When it comes to esports, where the companies you'll be talking to probably are a lot smaller than maybe companies that are hiring for engineers, you have a easier barrier of entry. Actually, not an easier barrier of entry, but you have an easier way to show off who you are rather than like your capabilities. And more likely than not, your resume isn't going through a machine to scan all the keywords to pick you up to sort through 500 resumes to find the 12 that are going to actually go through hiring. In esports, some orgs get a lot of resumes, but it's probably going in front of someone and they're giving it like a 15-second look before they decide whether to give it a second look or not to go to the manager that's hiring or something like that. So I think there are so many more ways in esports to make your application, your resume stand out compared to maybe an accounting job, an engineering job, I don't know what else, a lawyer, like some law job or something like that. So that's how I would say they're very different, and even the application process just feels really different because I think especially in esports, you can just tweet people, you can DM them and get someone's attention and get a conversation going because people care. Engineering, that might be a little harder. You can use LinkedIn, but there's still a lot of old people that don't care about LinkedIn and don't care about social media or don't know how to use a computer in engineering. So I even think the way you apply for jobs and make connections looks super different in this industry.
Yeah, kind of like I did with you, right? I just kind of messaged you on Twitter, you know,
Hmm.
for the resume review, but also for this. I was just like, "Yo, you want to come on the podcast?" And you're like, "Yeah, sure."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, exactly. You can't just go to like the hiring manager's house and knock on their door and be like through an engineering firm and be like, "Hey, here's my resume," or like even send them like snail mail. It's going to be hard to find their information, but esports is so young that it involves more people that are more internet or computer friendly. So we're on socials and we're easily to track down and stalk.
And it's also, I guess you brought it up a little bit earlier, but it's also nice to know that esports resumes, like when you submit it for a job, it's probably like actually being read. That's really nice to know. So I'd kind of like to go through your journey and your path into esports. I think it's a pretty cool and unique path. So you started out or you went to school for engineering, and you were in engineering for how long?
For about 6 years.
And so when did you kind of know, or when I guess did you get that first idea that you'd like to transition from engineering into esports?
Yeah, so I think it starts off like a lot of people's thoughts that are just like probably gamers. I played League of Legends in season one in the middle of a winter finals week. My friends are like, play it. I'm like, no, play it. No, play it. No. Okay, fine. I'll try it, you know? And then, of course, it just consumes my life. Luckily, my grades didn't suffer a lot, but I'm pretty sure I didn't do that well on those exams that week. That being said, I got really into the game, got addicted, had a lot of friends playing it because we're all in college, we're all in the dorms, and it was so easy to find people to play with. And I just kept playing the game and loving it. And I remember when, before it was even probably labeled as an esport, like there was competitions, really small competitions. I think Twitch might have started like breaking into the scene. So like I was watching Double Lift play his like amazing Blitzcrank when there was like no meta in the game. This is like it's so crazy. And then just like falling in love with this whole like, oh, content creators, there's Twitch streamers, and like, wow, these players have crazy stories where they've been just like kicked out of their home. So like I think a lot of people that follow at least LCS, at least if it was that long ago, they've just like really connected with these stories and players and are really invested in the scene. At that time, like nothing changed in my life except I was just playing League and I found the game that I like loved. I think the year after I graduated, I moved to Illinois. I went to school in Wisconsin. So it was a little out of state, not that far, but I wasn't around my friends anymore to play as much. A lot of them quit. So I was looking for ways to get better at the game and enjoy the game more because solo queue and ranked really, really are painful sometimes. And through that, I found podcasts. listening to podcasts and watching other content creators on YouTube, I suddenly got like really into the game, got better. I climbed from pretty much bronze to plat in one season after I started consuming all this content and like really working on it. And then I'm like, I'm going to start a podcast. So then through this whole process of like actually becoming someone that's contributing to mm, content on the internet, I was like, wait, one day it just clicked. I'm like, can this be a career? Because I never thought of that. I never thought this could be a career. And even when I even slightly considered it, like season 2 of LCS, I'm just like, there's no money in there. Like these people are probably starving and living like just couch surfing. So one day I said there was money starting to get more and more. The scene started getting more and more legitimate. I'm like, hey, maybe this can be a thing. What if I actually tried? So I started trying a little harder. And I think this is maybe where my story diverges from a lot of people's stories. And maybe this will be inspiration to some people or it maybe give some guidance. But I just started like grinding really hard. And then I started networking. And then I got in contact with people like Weldon Green, who is now the head coach of CLG. I got in contact with Travis Gafford, who does a lot of the interviews for the LCS. And I've met a lot of other people along the way that either like were projects that were dead ends because I realized I hated doing that kind of stuff, or finding projects that grew my network bigger, my skill set bigger. And eventually I paid off all my debt. I talked to my wife and then like we're like, okay, this is how we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it like as risk free as possible. Quit my job, got a freelancing gig working for a random mobile gaming company, doing social media. Pretty much got let go by them. Like our contract ended, but they didn't like me, and I was slacking, just straight up. Even though I had like this amazing opportunity, because I just hated it. And then I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. And then eventually I moved to LA because Travis told me you should be out in LA if you can. I'm like, yeah, I think you're right. So I packed up, made that big move. And during this whole time, I started getting in contact with Golden Guardians, got in contact with me, asked me to do some video edits. Barely have any experience with video editing, but the stuff that I did have caught people's eye. And then through grinding harder and harder, I eventually got offered full time. And then now I'm working in esports full time.
So I was kind of like trying to like find some stuff on you and like find kind of to guide my questions.
Sure, sure.
And I actually found out that you did like a lot of like side projects. So
Mhm.
I found the Lola podcast, which is probably one of the bigger side projects. The Weldon Green podcast. You had Ever Esports
Oh, yeah.
and
I forgot
and
about that.
and the Grind was like the Grind like also a podcast series.
Yeah, The Grind was part of Ever Esports was an amateur organization, and The Grind was a podcast I made for them. I was trying to be like the podcast guy, right, in esports, which helped a lot, and it helped me focus, like, my energies and efforts somewhere and even my skill set. I'm not doing podcasts right now. I still love podcasts. I kinda wanna start a new podcast, but I have to, like, find the time and pull the trigger on that. But, yeah, even though I didn't become the podcast guy, I still, like I helped with Travis Gafford's Hotline League. I got that into audio format and helped him with that stuff too. So, um, being I guess, the one piece of advice that I'd drop about that is, like, being the guy for something is very, very valuable. It's super valuable, and then it just ended up branching off to other things and other work and getting that network, but being the guy that knows how to do that thing, whatever that may be, really, really helped get me noticed.
Would you say that because you were that guy, you were that podcast guy, that kind of helped you make those connections with Weldon Green and Travis Gafford?
Yeah, absolutely. What the story with Walden is pretty much I was doing the Lola podcast, did probably maybe like 200 some episodes. I can't remember right now. And at the time I was like, I'm going to be the podcast guy. So I put out a tweet, I pinned it on on my profile, and I said like, hey, if you need help with a podcast, hit me up. And I think that's how I like created the Grind podcast. And then during this whole time, I'm always on social media, like replying to, commenting on all of Travis Gafford's YouTube videos, all of his tweets, going to Weldon stuff because he was at the time a sports psychology, like a mental coach, and he was creating content that I was really enjoying. So I was commenting on everything of his and tweeting him, sending him stuff. Like if I see like, oh, Weldon, what do you think about this article? You know, like actually networking and trying to create conversations. So eventually one day, like, you know, he likes my tweets every now and then. One day he saw my pinned tweet, which was like 2 months old. And then he DM'd me and he's like, hey, are you still doing this? Right. So I got in front of his face enough without being forceful, annoying, and like bringing value to him that eventually like he noticed. And when the need came, because he was trying to figure out like how to create his stuff into a podcast, he reached out. And that's how we got connected.
So how did that kind of connection with Travis happen? Was that because of he saw your work with the Weldon Green podcast, or how did that kind of start?
Like I said, I tweeted out at him and like talked to him. I DM'd him a few times, I think, maybe with DMs being 8 months, a year, 12 months apart from each other, never getting a response. I think I met him in Chicago during World's quarter semifinals. I can't remember which one. And I talked to him, and like when I talked to him, I talked to him about his project. So like, oh, you know, this like late night league project that you're doing, I think is like really cool. This is kind of weird. I'm like curious that why you decided to do this. And he's like, oh, you watch this stuff? Oh yeah, like I would love your input. And we just started talking about it. So I think I created an impression there. I don't know if he connected that person with Twitter me, but eventually I saw that he created Hotline League, and I was asking him before in like cold DMs, like if he was interested in doing a podcast, like I could help, like this is what I could provide. Didn't get a response, but once Hotline League started, I reached out again. So then this time, like the persistence and timing worked out, where he's like, "Oh yeah, like you do podcasts. I've seen like you do some stuff," because he probably checked out like my profile after I DM'd him like multiple times. He's like, "Yeah, what do you think about Hotline League as a podcast? Blah blah blah. Like, is there like, you know, should I even get viewers on the podcasting platform when all my like most of my money comes from YouTube ads? Like, how do you monetize podcasts and like these kind of questions?" So I eventually talked to him, figured things out, see what to do. I'm like, "Hey, I found you a free option. There's like no risk involved, right?" So then he's like, "Okay, let's do this." So I made it as easy for him to say yes, and then if I started like uploading his YouTube content onto a podcasting platform, like he started noticing like, oh, Sam's like really on top of things. He's always consistent. And then like every now and then I ask him like, hey, do you need a thumbnail for your Hotline League like thing? I put this together or whatever. And then I think another thing I did was I was always the first person to click on Hotline League because I had it on like alerts. So when it got posted on YouTube, I would listen to it at like 2 times speed, skip, and then be the first person to timestamp it. So then he'd pin my comment. So like these are all the ways I was like, I'm gonna be so useful to you that you cannot ignore me, you know?
Yeah, you're gonna create so much value that it'd be dumb not to have you around.
Exactly, exactly. So we're doing this Hotline League stuff. And then what really got me to start getting paid work from him, because I was just doing this all over volunteer. I never asked for money. I was like, I want to do this because you're making the scene better, blah, blah, blah. And I really enjoy your content. So I was like, okay, cool. And then I just like made a video for him one day. That's like a 30-minute social clip from Hotline League because I'm watching them anyway. And I was like, hey, if you want to use this on Twitter, go for it. He's like, whoa, this is cool. How long did it take you? I'm like, oh, just a few hours. It took me like 10 hours or whatever. He's like, oh, yeah, if you can make some of these, I totally would pay for that. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah. And then from there, like he got me in contact with Ateo people. Is a clothing branding company, like focused on esports. They're amazing people. Rachel and Brianne, shout out to them. They're like awesome bosses and awesome people. So I started working with them on contract for like 2 months before I realized like, hey, I realized I didn't want to be a social media manager, and that's what I was doing for them. But yeah, like through that, so many doors opened up. And then I believe the last time I heard this story, I think my boss even told me that Travis contacted my boss as like, hire this person. So then they like reached out to me. And then I also was in Golden Guardians face, like posting content about them, flaming their YouTube channel and like telling them how do they improve things, and like getting in front of every team's face as much as possible. So like they'd notice me.
Those videos that you were just talking about, so you had a YouTube channel called just esports content, right?
I think esports content might be just esports content. I'm not sure, but yeah.
And you created kind of a short series of videos where you kind of went all in critiquing I guess esports teams like videos or like how they did social media. Did those videos that you created on that channel that's what put you in front of Golden Guardians, right?
Yeah, I would say so because I've heard like little bits of the story more and more like in random conversations with my boss or like talking to Travis like at LCS Arena when we were going to LCS Arena. But what I did was I published 3 videos and I started from the worst team in the LCS at the time when it came to rankings and then was trying to do all 10, but I just lost steam or got distracted. I can't remember what happened. And what I was trying to do was be like, "Hey, these are the things you can fix on your YouTube channel. It's really, really easy. And I know this stuff because I'm a YouTube pro," which wasn't true. But I'm like, trying to put authority to my name and like get in front of them. So what I did was I made these videos telling them how they can improve their channel. And a lot of it's just best practice things that I've learned from watching content. And like anyone that does maybe 5 hours of research could like learn all this stuff. But ultimately, what I did was like I posted it on their subreddit, I posted it on their Discord, I posted it on Twitter, tagging them, and then I went to Optic Gaming next, and I did the exact same thing, and then FlyQuest, and my FlyQuest one has 204 views, like which is absolutely absurd to me, and I'm sure if I watch these videos, I'm gonna cringe really, really hard because I also like I think I kind of got lucky with this because looking back at it, I definitely flamed some teams hard even though it should have been more professional and try to be objective. And I was going into the recordings trying to be objective and be like, "Oh, you can improve this." But instead, I'm like, "Wow, this is horrible. Like, what are you doing here?" And then like, "Wait, but like, this is a nice try, and I think these are the things that you can improve." And like, do compliment sandwiches and stuff. But yeah, it went off a little too hard. But yeah, I remember I talked to our social media manager, current social media manager, Rachel, and she's like, "Yeah," I was like, "Who is this Sam guy? And I hate him. Like, why do I hate him so much?" And then we met and she's like, "Oh, Sam's like a nice guy." But it got attention of these organizations. And like, it's a lot easier when you're starting with like the smaller organizations too. Like, I didn't shoot my shot with like TSM and Team Liquid because I think that would be a lot harder. And they just have a lot more people bothering them and
Yeah.
DMing them and trying to get their attention. So,
Probably at that time it was also kind of a unique spot in LCS where they were bringing in like a lot of new teams and kind of teams were trying to get their grounding. So that was probably what 2017.
I made these videos 2018, it looks like. So that was not even that long ago.
You talked about this a little bit earlier, but you did some, I guess, freelance work for
Mhm.
Golden Guardians for video editing and whatnot.
Yep.
How did that kind of happen? Yeah, I think you said something about maybe Travis like recommending you, but how did you kind of get that first, I guess, initial contact with Golden Guardians?
Yeah, so this one, my timeline might be a little. My timeline is definitely fuzzy since I've been in esports. So my perception of time is completely gone. It's not linear anymore. It's just a cloud. But um, I don't remember if I did this video and then that's how they got to me, or. But I do know that Travis recommended me because he was what happened was when Travis started posting those social videos of Hotline League that I was creating, people started noticing them. I think one went like, relatively viral in that small community of like Travis's followers. And people would DM him and be like, "Hey, who did this? Hey, did you do this? Who did this?" And then he would say, "Who's up? Who did it?" And then I think Spellsy, my boss, he used to be. I think he was roommates with Travis back in the day, so they're good friends. So I think Spellsy probably reached out to Travis and asked like, "Who did this?" And he said me because what ended up happening was I was positioned or lucky enough where I didn't have to go out and reach Spellsy. Spellsy directly contacted me, and I think that's what happens when you have that specialized skill set where people are seeking you out and you don't have to do as much of the work when it comes to networking. That's not exactly what my situation is, but like for example, podcasting, if I was a podcasting guy, people could reach out directly to me because they're like, "Oh, you're looking for a podcast? Go talk to Sam. He's done 20 of them and they're all successful," or something, right? So with this one, people are noticing my content, people are liking my content, so they're like, "Let's go find who this guy is." So Spellsy actually just like DM me in Discord because I think we were and I was following I was in every single Discord server for every LCS team. So he was able to just easily DM me on Discord and be like, "Hey, uh, how's it going?" And then we had like this, like, "Oh, this is interesting. What does he want?" And like eventually he's like, "So, do you think you could do like this kind of?" Or actually, I think he first said like, "Oh, we have this idea for this video." I'm like, "Okay." And he explained it to me. I'm like, "That sounds great." And I was like waiting, like, "Are you gonna ask me to do it? Are you just like looking for my advice?" And he's and it was like this weird, like awkward. I don't know how you have awkward silences in Discord chat, like in text, but it felt like an awkward silence. And then he's like, "Yeah, like, do you want to make these?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to." And even like with payment, I didn't even think about like asking for payment. I'm like, "I'm doing it. I don't care if I have to do it for free or if you're gonna pay me." Luckily, they did pay me. I'm really grateful for that. But I was just like, I'm going to do it because this is like another shot that I can't miss or an opportunity that I can't like pass up. So that's how that all started. And then I started making like these meme highlight videos, which I think probably is now my claim to fame with video editing.
Yeah, I was actually watching a video today. It was something like how to make your like 3 tips to make your dreams come true, and it was like kind of like a comedy sketch, but like there was also some good advice. And one of the tips was if you want to do something for like a living, do it for free. Like do it yourself first, and
Hmm.
like do it like you're doing it full time, and you'll eventually get into it. And it kind of sounds like that was a little bit of what you did. Is you did stuff and you tried stuff and you found stuff that you like to do and you found out what you didn't like to do, and you networked along the way, and it kind of worked out for you.
Yeah, I think so. And I think like a big takeaway from that, and I hear this a lot from people is like, "Oh, I'm just interested in all these things," right? And a lot of people when they're like, "Oh, I want to get into esports," well, what do you do? He's like, "Oh, I'll do anything. I don't care. I'll do anything because I just love esports so much," right? And then those people burn out when you give them a project they just like really don't care about, and then they flake out and they disappear and they ghost you and those kind of things, right? But the thing is, I always thought I was gonna be social media. I love social media, blah blah blah, and then I do social media work, and I'm like, this sucks. I don't like it. And but the thing is, if I sat there thinking about it and not trying it and not doing it, I'll never know, right? So I think like especially people that are young, and I think anywhere in your 20s is still young. I'm 31 now. I spent most of my 20s just figuring out like, do I like doing YouTube? You know what? This is not for me. I'm not good on camera. Or like, oh, like what about podcasts? Oh, I'm horrible on podcasts. And then like I get better at it, but I like it. Or like, oh, maybe I'm gonna be a streamer. Like I've tried so many random things and learned so many random things. And I would I think a lot of people are afraid that it's gonna be a waste of time. But I can honestly say that everything that I've learned about social media, even though I don't like being a social media manager, has helped me make social media content. Like make I know how videos on Twitter are supposed to be perceived and what people are looking for on Twitter, right? I know like how difficult it is to be a streamer. So when I interact with our streamers and trying to help them make their YouTube channels, I know some very small percentage of what they're struggling with, but I at least have learned some things. So there's always like I really don't believe there's any wasted learnings, even if you decide not to go down that route anymore.
Hey everyone, a bit of the audio in this recording got messed up, so there's a skip in the conversation. To sum up that topic, I started talking about my last guest, Ashley, and how she has transferable skills from her geography degree that she uses regularly in esports.
I don't care if you just graphics or if you do cinematic highlight reels. If you don't know how to tell a story, like even though that might not be a quote unquote technical skill set under editing, you need to learn that. Like even with motion graphics on how to show off a logo, there's a story there and you might not think of it that way. And this is like one of those random things that you learn from like English class and writing that stupid essay you hated in like 7th grade or like even just like watching a YouTube video about like how they figured out the movie Parasite and like the storyboarding for that. Like all like storytelling is such an important thing for all video editors, and it's like a pain in my side right now when I have to work with video editors that don't understand story. Like that is a universal skill that I think every single person needs to know, whether they think it's related to their job or not. And I think that's just one of those things that like seem like a random skill that you don't need to learn, but it helps like in every job, whether it's marketing, video editing, podcasting, any of that stuff. It's so incredibly important.
Is that your biggest pet peeve when hiring video editors?
No, my biggest pet peeve with video editors is probably actually my problem in picking the wrong ones. but but it's not always storytelling. But seriously, storytelling is so important in every facet of life. And with video editors, like that may I for example, I'm working on an educational series and it doesn't sound like there's storytelling involved there. But then when I'm like, hey, we need to make this 30 seconds long and we have a lot of information to get through, and actually we probably should cut 20% of it, that involves storytelling and understanding like what every single part of that educational video needs to be part of the main hook, purpose, storyline, and even saying like even answering the question like if you don't know this, it's gonna well, how is this gonna hurt you, right? So setting up those things that can be really, really like simple and subtle is like really important and also makes a cohesive like way to teach something. So that's one of the things that I'm working on. And if my editor is listening to the well, whether or not he's listening to it or not, I'm not flaming him. He's great, and I actually really like working with him. But yeah, like storytelling is super super important for editing. It doesn't matter if it's like editing a narrative, which a lot of editors do, or cinematography or whatever. But even just like the simple motion graphic stuff or highlight reels, telling a story like is so so important.
Well, I guess can we talk a little bit? This is kind of a little bit besides the point of esports careers, but maybe it's just like something I personally want to know. So, do you work for Golden Guardians or do you work for the Golden State Warriors? I'm kind of interested in that partnership between Golden Guardians and Golden State Warriors.
Yeah, yeah. So Golden State Warriors owns Golden Guardians. The way that it works is Golden State Warriors invested, got an LCS spot, branded as Golden Guardians, and then even but what I would say from the Warriors point, it like branches out between you have the Golden State Warriors, you have their G League team, which is like their minor league basketball team, which is Santa Cruz Warriors. You have the Golden State Warriors basketball team. You have Warriors Gaming Squad, which is our NBA 2K esports team. And then you have Golden Guardians, which is branches out into an LCS team, a WoW PvP team, a WoW MDI team, a WoW oh shoot, what is it called? It's the WoW Guild BDGG. So we have those those four WoW thing or three WoW things. Then we have like our card game auto battler, TFT, Hearthstone like streamers who compete. We're in Smash Bros. Melee, which is with Zane. And then I would say maybe our Battle Royale team, which is currently only two people now. We used to have three, but now it's only two. And they play Apex and Valorant and those kind of things. So that's how the dichotomy, like how it's broken up. So then I have worked on our Warriors Gaming Squad, the NBA 2K teams, kind of stuff and content and helped with that. Right now, that's mostly run by freelancers with some oversight from us. But yeah, I dip my toes in. Actually, everyone probably in the office in LA dips their toes in all of those things to some extent.
Yeah, I was actually just about to ask if you guys if the 2K team was kind of independent of Golden Guardians or how that worked.
I think it's probably just some you know how the Overwatch League split up like Cloud9 is in LCS and in Overwatch League, but it's under two different names.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's something like that with some separation and legality. I really don't know, but that's my assumption why it's split up that way and they're not just the Golden Guardians.
Gotcha.
Because that's NBA, which is split up into three different divisions, which is like the franchise, the teams, and the players. So like, there's some legal separation. I have no idea. I honestly don't care because I don't need to care about it. And people smarter than me that get paid a lot more money than me make those decisions. So I'm just like, yes, sir. I'll just do what you tell me to.
What does your job look like as a marketing analyst? Kind of what do you do? What's kind of the goal of your job and what does your day-to-day look like?
Probably with everyone that you've talked to, and I've listened to both the first two episodes a little bit, not into completion, but and talking with anyone in esports probably feels like it's very startup-y. People wear different hats. I think I heard that on the last one that you're we were
Yeah.
talking about too. That's totally true with me too. I think we're building out a team. I think our staff is small compared to other esports organizations as well, at least in the comparing to the LCS. So my day to day changes a lot. It's starting to get a little more consistent, especially when the LCS season starts. It's pretty consistent. But what I say my goal is to take care of a number of projects. One of them being figuring out our social video content that we put on to our social media platforms, excluding YouTube. Another one would be trying to figure out how to support our streamers and building out their YouTube channels. And then one of the newer projects I'm involved in is helping grow our main channel with the content as well. And then what else could it be? And then I do some video editing. Like I try to get out a weekly meme video, a meme highlight video, but sometimes that doesn't happen with everything else that has to happen. So a lot of my tasks, the majority of my time is managing our freelancers because I can't edit all our social videos. I concept them and maybe figure out with our internal video editors how to do it, or edit them myself, or a mix of both, and then find freelancers to be like, hey, this is what we have. I think your skill set fits this and can add more to it. How do we get you involved to put this out weekly for us? So that's mostly what I do, I would say.
You said this, but Golden Guardians is kind of like on the smaller side compared to like organization wise, I guess. Like your team is seems like it's a lot smaller than like TSM and Cloud9 and Team
Mhm.
Liquid, right? What all kind of positions are there in the office with Golden Guardians?
Oh man, this is you're putting me on the spot and I'm gonna forget someone and I'm gonna feel guilty afterwards, but I'll do my best. So we have the competitive and corporate side, right? So I'll just kind of ignore the competitive side. That's like the coaches, the coaching staff, and the players, right? General manager, those kind of things. So then on our competitive side, we have two video editors, a videographer. Um, oh, I should have just started at the top too, but we have me as the esports marketing analyst. Then we have art director who is now our creative director, and then we have oh man, I don't remember his title, but he kind of helps with a lot of the administration in the office. I think that's it. So I think that's 9. Did I list off 9 people? Oh, and then we have a project manager.
I probably should have touched on this earlier before we dove so deep into your job as a marketing analyst. But
Mhm.
how did you kind of get into this? Like, I know you had like some connections and you'd already been doing some freelance work for Golden Guardians, but did you just kind of they just had the job available and you applied, or what what did becoming the marketing analyst look like?
Yeah, so I would say, and I came across this term recently, and I think this is what happened to me, is I'm pretty sure I was an opportunistic hire. So what that means is, and I heard this from an Amazon VP, where they say that there always have room for an opportunistic hire. When you find someone that you're like, I need this person at my company because they're going to provide value and bring us in money, we need to find a spot for them. So I think they were Golden Guardians was like, we have budget to expand our team and we're thinking about these things. We don't have anything concrete, but there's a Sam guy and we want him on our team. And therefore they're going to figure out like what title to give me. And even like the title, because it's a bigger, because we're part of Golden State Warriors, it's a little bigger company. So that like even the title matters because of like the pay ranges and I guess like the hierarchy or whatever. So that's why how they gave me my specific title. That being said, I would say the reason why I'm in marketing is because I know our audience pretty well. At least when it was just League of Legends, I know the league audience really well. And I was helping make decisions around strategy too on like what's going to work with them. And depending on companies, they might have marketing even like the head of marketing might have content right underneath them. So content is still part of marketing pretty much. And that's why I would say I'm a part of marketing. And besides that, like if you don't know who Gary Vaynerchuk is, Gary V, he's like this very boisterous digital entrepreneur that has like his own agency. I followed his stuff religiously for a while, and that's probably where all my quote unquote marketing or social media like education comes from. I digested so much of his content, tried using some of it in practice, understood how it goes, pick and choose things that I agree and disagree with. But eventually, I think what ended up happening, they saw me as a fit to help with content, but a lot of the strategy around it just because of like our initial conversations. And I didn't have to go through an application process, which is pretty rare too, because they're like, hey, Sam, we want you to do this thing. We've talked to you a few times. We've had some really good conversations about like your theories about marketing, which I didn't realize I was really talking about marketing at the time. And therefore, they're like, hey, we want to bring you on full time. And this is the job description or job title that we've come up with. I'm like, I don't care what the job title is. The description sounds fine. Just like, I'm totally down. Let's do it, you know?
Do you think that is something that's common in esports? I've never like I've heard the idea, right, of an opportunistic hire. I didn't know there was like an actual term for it. But is that like something that you think happens frequently in esports, or have you ever like do you know anybody else that is kind of in that been hired in that same manner?
I think there are probably tons of examples out there. Unfortunately, I'm probably blanking out on an obvious one. But I will say it might not be full-time work, but definitely if you have like a project that is totally doable. And actually, as I'm talking about this, I remember like when I was started doing freelance stuff for Golden Guardians, I had a guy that I was doing a podcast with a while back called I had to watch his podcast. It was covering like LCS content. And we ended it because I was just too busy. And then he came up to me. He's like, hey, I've been in contact with Cloud9 Jack, the owner of, I don't know what his title. I'm pretty sure he's the owner or CEO or something of Cloud9. Yeah. And he's like, hey, I pitched him this idea of a news segment on YouTube. And he's like, yeah, if you can do it, you're down. And if we like it, then we'll start paying you for it and we can like contract you out. So I totally believe this works for like project or freelance stuff. Might be a little harder for full time, but that being said, if you're able to show that you can provide value when like if you're a $80,000 salary, but you can bring millions of dollars to the company, they'd be stupid not to hire you, right? So I totally think that exists. I personally am always looking for my dream would be someone slides into my DMs and is like, "Hey Sam, I have this really great if LCS was an anime series that I've been working on. And I think like I can make every single week of Golden Guardians like related to some anime, do some crossover and edit a video for it." I'd be like, "All right, how much do you want? Let's do it." You know, and let me find budget. Oh, I don't have budget. Let me go like talk to my boss and make budget. Like that would be my dream. But unfortunately what ends up happening is people say, "Hey, can I get a job?" I'm like, "Oh, I can't really help you." Like, "Tell me what you can do." And they're like, "Oh, I'll do anything." I'm like, "Well, then it's more work for me to find a job for you or make a job for you." So yeah, to get to your question, I definitely think it exists, opportunistic hires in esports. It might not be exactly what you think in like a traditional company setting, but it definitely exists for freelance work. 100%. And if I say no because I don't have budget, well, once spring comes around and I'm like, "Hey, I remember this guy Jack that said he would do this. Like, I'm gonna go figure out how to fit this in budget because I think it's a great idea." And he gave me like two random videos of it that he linked to from his like YouTube channel that has 0 subscribers on it. So I know he can do it, and it's less risk for me to take. Like, I'm gonna make budget for it. And I'm not gonna forget that person.
I actually believe I may have talked about something similar on episode 1. But yeah, like if you can provide value and you like create value for a team or organization or a company, they're gonna hire you, right? And actually, you had talked about you said something about a lot of people in esports just like they'll come up to you and they'll say like I'll do anything, and I think it's funny because I was kind of that way. And
Me
maybe
too.
most people have been that way,
Me
yeah.
too. Absolutely.
And so I was actually watching another video earlier today. I don't know if you. It's a guy named Atrioc. He worked with Twitch, and I think he works at Nvidia right now. But they were also doing some like resume review type stuff, and they brought up a similar scenario where it's like people will approach you and say like, hey, like, can I like do some work for you or like do work for you? And they'll ask like what they can do, and they'll just say they'll do anything. And when you say that, at that point, you're pretty much like giving that person, like, you're saying, do more work so that I can have work.
Exactly.
And I never really thought about it until I saw that video and until you've talked about it. But yeah, that's probably the worst approach you could take is just
Yeah.
saying, I'll do anything, find me some work to do.
Yeah, instead of saying you'll do anything, just do something. Like, do something. That's a big, and like it's so hard. And that's why like I've started creating content around this, and I'm trying to like create a community around this. Like I created a Discord, and hopefully like people are helping each other, because man, when you have no direction and you have only dreams and no way to, like, you don't know how to figure it out, that stuff is really hard. Like I don't think I actually had like a legitimate clinical depression during like my grinding phase, but I definitely felt something. Like I felt some days I just could not get any work done. I just play League for 40 hours a week, and my wife comes home. She's like, "Hey, how was your day? Did you get work done?" I'm like, "No." I was like, I tried applying for jobs. Like it's hard. It's really hard, depressing, and it's super hard to do alone. So like being able to give direction, like just, and I hope, I'm glad people like you are making this kind of content, because this stuff is really hard, but there is a lot of resources out there. It might not be plain black and white and like here's the 1 through 5 step plan to get you into esports, but yeah, really look for it. There's a lot of content out there that's just a little hard to find, and hopefully like people like you and me can make content to really make it a lot more obvious. And ultimately, like, I want better people in esports. Not that the people around me aren't great. I think Golden Guardians, the thing that they do is they hire really, really well. But there's also a lot of people that probably like just have been in esports because they've been in esports and might not be as good. I've heard lots of horror stories. And esports is a scene that everyone talks about the esports bubble and where's the money coming from? Everyone running in the red. So when you're able to bring in someone that's able to bring so much value more than like their salary and their benefits cost, like that's a big deal. And I want those people around me, and I want those people as my competition to make me better too. So like I please, people that want to get into esports that have skills, go get your skills and kill it. Get into esports and work with me.
I'd actually like to talk a little bit about the content that you've started creating over these past 2 months that we talked about a little bit earlier. The career advice videos that you've been making, where you review people in the communities, you review their resumes and their cover letters. You might have even gone over a few LinkedIn's here and there. I know that you've been streaming recently,
Mhm.
and doing a lot more of it. I guess, what are the biggest takeaways from what you've done so far that you could? I think you just said something about like there's no like, step 1 through 5, but I guess
Yeah.
what kind of are like some of the biggest things you've seen that people could do differently on their resumes or cover letters that would be an improvement?
Yeah. No, seriously, I'm working on ideating and a video idea to be like the 5 steps you need to get like to write your resume. Like seriously, because I also know that that's the hardest thing. So if I'm able to give like a plan, that'd be awesome. My thoughts are so unorganized about this, but just going off the top of my head, I think don't just list all your experience. Instead, list like the impact you have from your experience. I think a lot of people say I did X, Y, and Z rather than saying doing X, Y, Z, I accomplished this amazing thing that's worth this much money, or got this many impressions, or saved this much time. Right? I see a lot of I see a lack of impact in resumes, right? Tell me, because anyone can say like I have public speaking, I am detail oriented, my skill is social media marketing. Anyone can say that,
Yeah.
but being able to prove it in a resume is really, really important. I also think executive summaries, I think there's a lot of hate on those because they're super useless. But if you make them useful, you suddenly have like a lot more control about what your first impression on your resume is. So you can get straight to the point being like, I am a marketing god that has, or maybe a better example, I am an amazing event coordinator that has done 500 events that housed over 1 million people and 1 million eyes. And had no delays. Like suddenly it's I don't have to read the rest of your resume. I'm just like, oh my God, this person is amazing. And then you look through the resume. So I think executive summaries are extremely underused and poorly done. Yeah. So use that to force a first impression that you want to create. And then I would say the other thing is when people have non esports experience, they need to figure out if it belongs on their resume slash how to leverage that to be useful for the job they're applying for. For example, if I started a lawn care business in high school and mowed people's lawns, but I actually bought like mowers and I hired my friends, like why does that matter to me? Oh, it matters to the hire because I know how to manage budgets, and that was a job requirement in the job posting. Or I had to communicate and figure out people's schedules and communicate with clients to schedule them because an administrative job I have to work with, or maybe a team management job I have to schedule scrims, right? So not just posting like, oh, I created a lawn care business that made $5,000 over a year. Instead of just saying that, say exactly what you did and how it's exactly related to what you want to be hired for. So I think that's a lot of missed opportunities that I've seen in a lot of resumes that could really show that they're qualified for the job, or at least a risk being worth taking.
I know the kind of the one big thing that you pointed out when I watched my resume review video. I believe I was applying for like a partnerships job with Beyond the Summit, and you had said something about me not having like that there might have been like partnership and sales experience in there, but you just didn't see it. And when you said that, like I just kind of had like a flashback, and like I remembered that I actually did have partnership, like tons of partnerships experience in a few roles that I had done before, and I like kind of went back to my resume and I was like, how did I miss this? Like, how did I not think of this when I'm applying for a partnerships role? And so
It's
yeah,
hard. Resumes suck. And that's why if you can skip the resume process through networking, like do that. Like, absolutely. Like, seriously, if you can skip this whole stupid resume process by a good network and talking to the right people and making good impressions and, like, coming to the LCS studio when that's a thing and, like, being able to randomly talk to Steve Aronset, owner of Team Liquid, because he's there in the arena, like, that is so much easier than having to craft a resume to 20 different people and hoping that you did it right, you know?
yeah, I bet it feels like a lot more valuable when you're able to network with somebody and like talk and kind of build like some sort of a relationship. I bet that's a lot more valuable, especially personally, than sending in a resume and cover letter and never hearing anything back.
Yeah, you never know if someone's gonna read it or not, so that's kinda like the scary thing about applying, right? And then even if you are able to have, like, a really good conversation with whoever, right? It might not be like, "Hey, get me a job," but it might be like, "Hey, I'm a sophomore in college. I really wanna get into esports, and I have an idea of, like I have a business degree. Like, what should I be doing? Hopefully, you're a little more prepared than asking like that broad of a question, but at least like you can get some input, right? And they'd be like, hey, we have internship programs. Like, you should look out. Check on Twitter in the month of March or something, and just like make sure you're following our Twitter account so you can see that. And also, like, make sure you're doing X, Y, and Z on campus, blah, 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 those kind of things. So you can have a conversation and get more personal, tailored advice. So I think like that's always nice. And then hopefully, you make an impression and they remember your name. So once it comes by their desk, whether it's a resume or the next time you see them when like you're really qualified for a position or something, like that always helps.
Yeah, I'm sure it kind of makes them like take a second look, like a second kind of read over your resume and be like, I remember this guy or I remember this girl from this event and they asked me this or whatever. What I guess how do you feel about, because I've kind of seen some mixed reviews on this. mixed opinions. But what do you think about putting a picture of yourself on your resume?
Okay, so this can get into a really it can go down a crazy route, I think. I've heard like Devin Nash and Ethan Evans talk about this before, who are Devin Nash's CMO of Nerd Fusion, which is a big agency. He also used to own Counterlogic Gaming, big esports organization. Ethan Evans, vice president of Amazon or like Twitch, does a lot of Twitch things. Came up with, I think, bits and a lot of things that people are using nowadays. And they like disagreed and agreed on some of these aspects, but ultimately, like, you never know what kind of biases people might bring into seeing your resume, right? You might have a misogynistic like hiring person. So then once they see a woman, they might judge it a certain way, right? They might see a minority and have their own prejudices against that, and then that might hurt your chances. There's always that layer of like what's going on, and that sucks. And sometimes that can hurt you, sometimes that can help you. But after thinking about that, and yeah, that really like tricky subject, I think it's always nice to add more personality to the resume. A picture is not going to make or break it, so it's not like huge, but it can help create an impression and make your resume stand out. So I definitely think it's something you think about, but yeah, for the most part, I don't think it's a make or break.
I've seen like some stuff where it's kind of like, if you're like a social media person or like a marketing person, like somebody who's kind of a little bit more out there with your job, that putting a picture on your resume is almost like a must. But then for like other things where like if you're like in accounting or something like business related, that you really shouldn't put a picture on your resume. But I also do think I saw the Ethan Evans, Devin Nash video that you were talking about, and I believe Devin was like, "Yeah, like add more personality. Like let me see who you are, and I can like put these accomplishments or like these things that you've done to a face."
Yeah. Yep,
So
exactly.
I just didn't know if it was kind of different for esports or, but I guess it's just kind of dependent on who you are and what you're applying for and how you feel about it.
Yeah, personally, I've put my face on resumes, and I've never put a face on like an engineering resume, but I have put faces on esports and game industry resumes. I've also omitted them too. Like sometimes I don't have space or it just didn't feel right for it. But yeah, I think it could be case by case.
Well, Sam, thanks for coming on the Esports Careers podcast. I really appreciate your insight on the topics and telling me more about your job and what you do. And you have a YouTube channel. Do you want to shout out any of your stuff or tell people where they can find out more about you? I know that you do resume reviews and stuff. So if people want to have their resume reviewed, where can they send that?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I always love doing podcasts, and now that I don't have my own podcast, I always really like jumping on other people's and not having to do the hard work, just coming in and talking about interesting stuff. So hopefully this was interesting. Hopefully it was helpful to people. If your audience likes what I talk about, yeah, follow my socials, follow my YouTube. You could pretty much find everything from my Twitter profile, and I think that's probably the easiest way to link out and find all this stuff rather than me saying a whole bunch of random URLs. But my Twitter handle is just casual, one word. So it's pretty simple. And then, my YouTube channel, Discord, I'm trying to push a little bit more just because I want to create that community to like start talking about these kind of things. And also, if you do want resumes reviewed, go to the Discord and you can submit it there. And again, you can find those links from my social and from my posts. But yeah, if you want to follow esports stuff and have some good conversations, my DMs are open. Hit me up. I'm not super popular or anything, so it's really easy to get a hold of me. I'm just busy with work and side projects, so it might take a little bit. But I think that's one advantage from trying to DM like a CEO or an owner or someone really high up in the esports company. You might not hear back from them because they're really busy, but I'm small enough and I'm excited enough to try to help the community, and I have the time to, that you'll probably get an answer from me. So that's the one advantage I have if you want to like try to reach out and get some value.
Talking to Sam reminded me how important it is to stay persistent through my journey into esports. Again, if you need your resume reviewed, Sam does an amazing job of breaking things down and providing valuable feedback. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Esports Careers Podcast, help us spread the word by rating and reviewing the podcast. That way, I can keep making great episodes for you to listen to, and it helps other people find us too. If you've got a question for me or someone you'd like me to interview, you can reach me on Twitter @DweebGG. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.